So on this week's episode of Be More Super, the podcast, we're joined by an awesome director. I've had the opportunity of seeing this movie and I have watched it more than once. It's, of course, Follow Her, that releases on the 2nd of June in North America and soon after, I'm sure, worldwide. It's the lovely Sylvia Caminer. Sylvia, welcome to the show, my love.
Hi, Brian. It's great to be here. I'm a fan of your podcast, so it's
bless you. Do you know what? I've got to say, this film is just astonishing. It really, really is. And I can't wait to dig deep into this movie without spoiling anything, because I think that everyone needs to, get it on demand, see it wherever they can on the 2nd of June, because it is such a fun, intense and captivating watch. It really, really is. But before we explore that movie, I want to explore you a bit more about your career. So why on earth have you turned your life towards directing and this business? Because it's probably not one of the most competitive and probably one of the most challenging that you can choose.
It is. So I started off as a biochemistry major in college. I was going to do disease research, and you can see how similar the two professions are. But my passion since I was a child has been film and also stage. I had my aunt take me to see Broadway shows when I was a tiny child, and I'll never forget seeing Yul Brynner in The King and I, which just behind me is a huge poster from that film in France. And seeing things like that and some of the early American films like Singing in the Rain, and that made me realize there was such an escape into the world of film and theater. And so I became a bit obsessed with it. I wanted to go to movies whenever I could, and I'd see movies many, many times. And, I wanted to get the fan magazines. I'm talking when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, through my teens, I would say. And it was always a dream, but no one in my family had ever explored it. And I truly, as a child, thought, well, you had to be born into that. So I never actually considered doing it because I just thought, well, that's like, a rite of passage that I don't have the entry card in. And it wasn't until I was in college that I thought, well, wait a minute, other people are studying, maybe I can actually do this. And so I left the challenging organic chemistry and biochemistry classes to study theater at the State University of New York up in New Paltz. That was my first thought, was I'll direct for the stage.
And I've got to say, like the films like King and I, and films like that. I can't believe I'm going to say this to a director, but they don't make films like that anymore. And,
they don't.
I mean, the look of them and the style of them, and even how people talk in them, I've got to say, and the sound, it's just amazing. It really, really is. But that could be just nostalgia. Yeah. Who knows?
No, it's true. There's something that Technicolor. Now that we don't even shoot on film anymore, but yeah, it was a different, even you think about Frank Capra films, there was an innocence and a direct forward approach to talking about man's, the harshness of life and how do we overcome, and that now everything is so intricate and so much visual effects. And I feel like a little bit of the heart of film, the story, to me, story is everything. And some of that's been thrown out the window for special effects and visual effects, and I yearn for those.
And this is why I enjoy indie movies more, really, than the big blockbusters, because, again, I'm not going to put like the latest Spider-Man movie down, but I was having quite a heated conversation with my son, because he thinks it's the greatest film in the world. And me personally, I just think that when you strip back all the cameos and all the characters they brought back, what was the story actually about?
Right.
And for me, indie films, it's starting for me from the story outwards. And you just get a better experience. But again, obviously these big blockbusters are doing okay because it's that massive machine that is producing them, and billions of people are going to watch them. But when you were starting out, Sylvia, I mean, was there anyone in your industry that you're in now that really inspired you to maybe try and live up to or be like?
Yeah, So I had a lot of, I love the decade. American films in the 70s were probably my passion. I love that. And then I loved like the Italian neo-realist films of the 50s. So I loved early Fellini and De Sica, and Lena Wertmuller. She's one of the few female directors that truly inspired me as a, teenager and in college. But I would say, I got to work with some of my heroes as a production assistant and entry into the film world. I worked with Martin Scorsese. I mean, with him. I was a PA on Age of Innocence for
You work
a
with him,
few
it's fine.
days. Yeah. And Robert De Niro on A Bronx Tale. That was probably one of the most exciting experiences in my life as far as just getting into film. And I spent 4 months on that film as a PA, but I was in charge of extras. And I don't know if you're familiar with that film. I think it's so underrated, but it's such a beautiful film. And it was, a thrill. It was his first film as a director. And he was a very gracious and inviting director. I'll never forget, if you worked on the film in any capacity, you could go to dailies. And anytime I could get there, I was sitting in that editing room at Tribeca. And I'll never forget one Saturday afternoon, we'd been doing nights, so we couldn't watch dailies afterwards. So there was like 5 hours of dailies. I, of course, showed up. It was me, De Niro, the DP, and the editor. That's it. The four of us. So for 4 or 5 hours, I sat like 3 rows in front. I heard them. It was like film school, just talking about how they would cut this or use that, or I wish we'd done this. And the camera, the DP saying, well, if we go and we shoot that again. And I frankly was shocked that I was like, where is everybody? How can I be the only person here?
And what a way to start learning your craft, really. And being on those sort of sets must have been so magical. You know what I mean? With surrounded by so many great names, and obviously, it must have been amazing. But I've got to ask as well. I mean, obviously, I ask this to all actors as well as directors, producers. I mean, do you have a plan in place in what you want to achieve in your career, or did you have a plan, or do you have one currently?
I certainly thought I would be directing fiction films sooner. I just got so busy making other people's films and producing and then doing my own scripted and documentaries. But to me, I just want to tell great stories, and I don't want to have to take 3 years to find the money to make them. To me, that's what success would look like, for funding to not be so rigorous and to have an easier doorway so I could make a film a year, because I would love to be making more films. I have a few films I'm working on, but we then have to go out and you have to find the distributor. And hopefully if Follow Her has some success, at least it's having some success with critics, hopefully that will make it easier.
I mean, the audiences really don't understand how complicated it can be to get a movie from A to Z.
Right.
They press play on their on-demand service, and it's there. But obviously, as you just said, distributors, you've got different chains that you've got to go through. It's madness. It really, really is. So let's talk Follow Her, because Follow Her, as I said earlier, I've seen it a couple of times now. And I will explain why I've seen it a couple of times. But if you could, in your own words, describe what this movie is about.
Sure. So it is about a young woman in her late 20s who is kind of starting out as an influencer. She's an actress, a struggling actress, has a live stream show on a platform that we created called Live Hive. And her entryway is filming secret jobs she finds online. The stranger, the better. And she uses hidden cameras. And this is how she's building her audience. And she takes the job to help write the ending of an erotic thriller and goes off to write it with a dashing Australian man. And things go off the rails a bit. And she kind of has to fight for her life and her sanity.
I mean, it's just an awesome movie. It really is. I mean, am I right in saying this is, I think you mentioned it before, this is your first feature movie that you
narrative did. Yeah.
I mean, why now and not earlier? Because you're quite established in filming and directing documentaries, like with Rick Springfield,
Right.
which I would love to watch, by the way. It looks
Oh, I'll
awesome.
send you a link.
And Jessie's Girl, oh my God,
Yeah.
such an awesome. But I love watching documentaries like that. They're just awesome to watch.
Yeah, I love Doc. Yeah.
So why now? Why not sooner?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I had written a script called The Exchange, which I planned to direct, 10, 15 years ago. And, I just couldn't really find the entryway. I had, was thinking about trying to get an actress because it wasn't going to be a cheap movie to make. And it just, I somehow found an easier entryway into documentaries, frankly, because they're less expensive and you can kind of go at them. They take a lot longer. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I really decided I can't wait anymore. And I knew I wanted to find a genre film. So I read so many scripts, most of which were either just too, had no backbone, or they were just gory, or they felt just nothing I would want to spend a couple years working on. And so it just felt like I really couldn't wait any longer, and that I really wanted to find something timely and something that would take people on a fun ride and maybe have something to say as well.
I mean, what was it about this movie that attracted you to it to actually say, do you know what? I want to jump on board and direct it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I got the script and all the elements were there. I saw, I love that the lead character, Jess, is very flawed, that she's a bit morally ambiguous, I'd say, and she does some very questionable things. But and I thought it would relate to a young audience as well, because the whole social media and trying to find fame and success and monetary gain by changing, doing ordinary things maybe in heightened situations. And so I thought it would be great fun to do that. And I loved the arc of the main character and how intense things got between, the protagonist and antagonist. And I thought as a director, there was a lot of meat to chew on there. And when I had my first call with Danny Barker, who is the writer, and I learned, that she had done a YouTube show back in 2010 where she did something a little bit similar. She found odd jobs online, secretly filmed them for her YouTube channel.
Oh, wow.
So I found that she was way more careful, and she always brought people, guys with her to make sure she would be safe. But I found that really interesting because there was a level of truth to the story, which, especially as a doc filmmaker, I found really interesting. And then we really hit it off, and we both decided that we thought we could collaborate really well together, and would jump off the cliff, which is really what it is when you decide to make a movie and you go all in.
And you definitely went all in, because I've got to say, these characters, it's very psychological. It took me on this journey where I didn't know if I liked certain characters or I disliked them, and then I liked them again, and then I didn't know. And it's just fantastic. It really, really is. So when you take on a project like this, and obviously it's been written by Danny, and she's got a vision. So, did you have a vision in mind for it as a director? And did it change at all through the filming process?
Yeah, so first off, yes. So I definitely did have a vision. I prefer horror films and thriller films that instead of showing you, they make you think. They make you come up with your own idea of what might happen. Because to me, the human imagination is far more scary than anything you can show on film. And I did take a bit from the master of suspense, Hitchcock. And I used some of the elements he used in a lot of his films, especially ones that were contained, like Rear Window. And so I wanted it to have the feel that things were always turning. You never, just when you thought you were sure-footed and it was going in one direction, it was suddenly going very much in another direction. And so I wanted to add things into the story that would let the audience feel like they knew more than the lead character, than Jess. So they would maybe lean in a little bit and almost want to yell at her, like, wait, don't do it, leave, go, don't trust him. So there was that. And then the element of the live streaming and the hidden cameras, that took a lot of work stylistically to pull off. And I worked with a DP, Luke Geisbuehler, who's a brilliant DP I've worked with many times. and he also has shot the Borat films. So he certainly knows a lot about hidden cameras and how to make things, feel real, but also voyeuristic, So, we talked a lot about how to make it, make the frame beautiful, and interesting at the same time. And also I find some films, they can get a bit exhausting if you're having to read too much, messages, or there's too much in the social media realm. So I knew we would, work hard at that in the beginning, in the first half of the first act, basically, and try to kind of almost get it out of the way. And then we could kind of leave it for a little bit and then go back to it when needed.
I mean, I've got to ask as well, because I don't know if I'm going mad, but the scene when she's in Tom Brady's barn. Am I right in saying that there were sounds that were put in to make it sound like a ship creaking?
Excuse me, allergies have been killing me. Interesting. No, we were trying to subliminally, like the wind. That was wind, but and a creaking of the wood.
Yeah. So that reminded me of like a boat, and it made me feel a bit uneasy. Do you know, because I get seasick. So literally the sound of that. So I didn't know if that was on purpose to make it. And now you've explained what it is, of course. But in my mind, I was feeling a bit uneasy with that. With that moment, which is awesome, because it served its purpose. Great. But I just wanted to ask that, because it was just I watched it twice to see if I was going mad or not. I mean, obviously the main star, well, one of the main stars is the awesome Danny Barker, and I've got a picture of her just there. I mean, obviously she wrote the film, and you directed it. I mean, how easy is it to direct a film where the main star is the writer? I mean, were there any moments? I mean, how easy is it? I mean, it must be quite a lot of pressure, especially as she's written, the story and everything.
Yeah, it was both great and then also at times challenging. And the great thing is that Danny, the script wasn't precious to her, which a lot of writers are so caught up in every word. She wasn't. She knew where she could let things go. And we knew together that there was a rhythm to the story. And there were certain things you had to stay within the line. But other than that, you could kind of go outside the line. And so she was great to work with in that way. And then there were times where she had a vision that was different than my vision. And so, especially, I'd say towards the late second act, when the Tom Brady character has he switches. And that we kind of caught her off guard there. We took him a bit further, and, we didn't quite tell her. Luke Cook and I had a little conversation, and he'd even come to me and said, I really want to go for it. I was like, please, by all means, we have to believe at that moment that character's capable of anything. So I know that was a little bit challenging for Jess, but it also raised her performance, because she was so kind of, taken aback, and she had so much to react to,
So would you like to take home a piece of film history or TV history into your own home? Find your own piece of magic with Prop Store, the world's leading auctioneers of film props, costumes, and more. So check out propstore.com or follow the link in the description of this video. And while you're doing that, why don't you use our special code? Our special code will give you 10% off anything in the Buy Now section. And the code is easy to remember. It's Brian10. That's BRYAN 10, and it's just above the finger, just here. Use that at the checkout to get your 10% off. That's propstore.com.
And we also did, oh my gosh, a lot of, which I wouldn't suggest, but we were finding the script even while we were shooting. And I only mean that in moments where, there were things that we were working on even while we were shooting.
Oh, it's really nice to hear, though, the collaboration, though, between you and obviously Danny. But I've got to say, Luke
Yeah.
Has got to have
Yeah.
been a handful because
Oh my
from his
gosh.
social media,
Yeah.
literally, he's like a
He's
wild card. I mean, what was
Yes.
he like to direct? Because he is awesome in this movie.
Oh, he's so good. I can't imagine the movie, well, without either of them. But so, Luke came in cold to us. Our casting director, Judy Henderson, out of New York, someone I've worked with for years, brought us in. He put himself on tape, and as soon as I saw it, I called Danny, and she looked at it, and we were like, "Oh my God, he is Tom." And he was great to work with on set. He brought so much to that role. He's a master of improv. You can probably guess which lines were his because they were just so off the top. And yeah, he brought so much. And with him, you never quite knew if he was in character. And he was a hoot. And he brought, I would say, some of the funniest lines in the movie, and I've heard Danny say this as well, were his.
Well,
Yeah,
hopefully,
no.
fingers crossed. I've reached out to him to see if I can get him on the show because, literally, I think it'll be as
Oh,
entertaining
I'll talk to yeah.
as he is in the movie because he just was amazing in it. I mean, the movie is a great balance, I've got to say, of tension, drama, and even laughs. So, as a director, how difficult is that to keep that balance while filming, knowing that balance is still there?
Right. Yeah, it definitely is challenging. I definitely think the film's a bit of a satire, and like for the biggest shock to me is that people find it scary because when you're filming and after you've been editing it for so long, I'm like, really? It had you on the edge of your seat because you kind of lose that, and you lose a little bit of the humor as well. But there were moments that were like, oh my gosh, this is a great moment, and typically it was Luke's moment with bringing in that humor of his. But you just had to allow for it. And I tried to, something I had learned from a mentor of mine was give the actors the freedom to explore and let them, like I tried to on big setups, ask them, are you good? Are you happy? I'm ready to move on in case they had something that they really wanted to explore or try. And I do feel like giving them that freedom allowed them to come up with some of those moments where there's this just extra heat or something because they had such good chemistry between them.
I mean, what would you like audiences to walk away with after watching this movie?
Well, I hope first off they enjoyed the ride, and I hope that if they went with someone, maybe they would say, "What do you think she chose?" at the end, so it might invoke a conversation, and maybe it might also get them thinking about social media and how they use it, how they interact with people. And I think a bigger question for society right now is do any of us actually have any privacy left? I mean, we've all, had those, where you're on a phone call and you talk about, oh, I'm going to London next week. And next thing you know, you're getting all these alerts about things in London to do. And, so the film talks a bit about that. So it might just get us all thinking about, well, what kind of world are we in? And, who are we trusting,
It
online?
definitely does get you thinking. It really, really does. I mean, I've got to say, I've got to encourage fans to watch this movie because more than once, because there are bits in it that, again, I missed the first time. All I'm going to say is under the bed. That's all I'm going to say. Which I saw it and it got me a bit like hairs at the back of my head. I was like, what? So what's your favourite moments of working on this project?
Oh gosh, there were a lot. I mean, we generally, I definitely have a motto in life, and it's, enjoy it. If you're not having fun doing it, don't do it. And it's also going to come up on the screen. So I don't take it too seriously. I mean, it's not brain surgery, So it was intense because we were fighting time was our biggest enemy was, we were running out of time. We didn't have it. I wish we'd had more days, but the first day of filming was a bit insane because, I had a perfect day plotted out. We were going to shoot the scene where they meet in the park. So I'm like, oh, it's perfect. They're getting introduced. The crew is getting to know each other. It's the first day of filming. And, you know, at about 9 p.m. the night before, suddenly a thunderstorm's scheduled to hit. So, you know, I had to call the production designer, you know, at 9 p.m. and say, oh my gosh, you know, Noah, is there a set you can have ready? And of course she says, well, the only thing I can have ready for you is the bedroom. So that entire scene in the bedroom is what we did day one. So getting through that, there were moments I'll never forget because I had shot listed the whole movie with a DP, except I think for that scene, because I had all these film scenes I was going to watch, which of course I never got a chance to.
But isn't it better to get all that out at the beginning and then the rest will be a smooth ride? I mean, I've read as well that somewhere that this could technically be a trilogy. This could be, you know, there could be more on its way, and even a musical, which I was quite, you know, I was like, I think. I mean, any news about this trilogy or a musical?
Well, so the musical, we actually had someone reach out to us and we were starting to work on that. It could come back around. Things got kind of held up in that. The music writer, you know, got delayed. And so we'll see. That could happen. Danny and I have always thought this would be, initially, it was, you know, I think she envisioned as at least a two-parter. And then I started thinking about it. We talked about writing it together. And you know, we have an idea for a trilogy where if you put the time in, by the end of the third film, boy, everyone gets a comeuppance. And oh gosh, it would be so fun to make. You know, who knows? You know, in today's world, I would think the first one, you know, needs to have a modicum of success, and hopefully a distributor will see the potential there. Or even it could even be a series. And there's so many different ways you could go. You know, this Live Hive, but also, you know, the other group could be a spinoff on, you know, this happening, you know, each week is a different person, and then you could bring back characters. And
it definitely needs to have a second one because the way it ends definitely need a second one for sure. I mean, we see a rise, which I've got to say, in female directors, and rightly so. You know, what do you think female directors specifically bring to the table for a film like Follow Her?
Well, I did feel it was important kind of for this film to be told from a female point of view. I think, you know, we don't try to make Jess perfect. She doesn't have to always look perfect or act perfect. We show her blemishes, we show her problems, and yet we also don't victimize her. Like we really wanted her to be a strong woman, and there are moments, of course, she is being victimized because he's a much bigger guy, but she always fights back, and they feel kind of even-footed, and I feel that was really important. And even the scenes in the bedroom, you know, it's more his body that is more in the focus, you know, in a sense. And yeah, there could have been, you know, initially in the script there, it was a bit more promiscuous. I was like, gosh, it could have been an NC-17, so I thought we better pull it back a little bit. But yeah, I think just being sensitive to making this lead character really strong, and even in the face of danger and being kind of taken over by someone, you know, physically stronger, she doesn't give in to that.
I mean, again, 2nd of June, cannot wait. Go and watch it. I've got a few more questions before we bid farewell. This is an unusual question. So imagine you're on an island. Sylvia, you're on an island. You can only have 3 films to watch for the rest of your life. What 3 films would you choose as a director?
Oh my gosh. Wow. Oh, I'd have to pick such different films. Boy, I'd probably have to go with like, either like Seven Beauties, or I'd probably say Seven Beauties just because it's so wacky and zany, and Giancarlo Giannini is so brilliant in it. And I think there's so much you can get every time. I don't know, it's a little bit of an obscure movie. I mean, I might say, I'd probably have to pick a Scorsese, an early film of his, maybe Mean Streets. Oh gosh, but Raging Bull is so great. There's so many, boy. And then, boy, I should pick something really happy. Those are both kind of dark, Mean Streets and Holy Cow. The King and I, Singing in the Rain. Gosh, maybe a Frank Capra film. Oh, that's a tough one. It's funny. I also love the movie The Professional. Do you know the film
Which
with Jean Reno and Natalie Portman? And it's funny because I just was reading something about Natalie Portman, thinking about that in today's world, and I was like, boy, I guess there's a point of that, but so
with Gary Oldman in it, I think as well, wasn't it?
He plays such a dark character. Yeah. So
good choices.
But that's a tough one. Oh my gosh.
Well, it is. There's so many great movies out there, and I watch so many for this show and everything like that, and there's only a few that really stick. Which I've got to say, Follow Her definitely will stick because it makes you laugh. It makes you sit at the edge of your seat wanting to know what's going to happen next. What is next for you? What are you working on next? Because I know that you've been in Israel.
Yes,
you've just come back. I saw that on social media of the pictures at the airport. Bless them, trying to get all those boxes on there.
Yeah.
It's a logistic nightmare. But what's next that we can see from you in the way of directing or producing?
Sure. So I do a travel series, an unscripted show, Samantha Brown's Places to Love, which is what took me to Jerusalem. And so that's, playing on PBS. And I have a few films I'm developing. I'm really excited about. I have a kind of an elevated horror film called It Walks Among Us. And I've partnered up with one of my favorite producers, David Higgins. He did a film called Hard Candy. Do you know the film?
Yeah.
Which is so good. And so we both found this script at about the same time out of the UK. And, I was already kind of talking with the writer about how much I loved in the characters. And it's a monster film. It's definitely more horror than Follow Her, but it also has something to say about who we are as people and about fitting in. And so we hope to start casting, and we're on hold because of the writers' strike. We both are very supportive of writers and believe that they need to get their fair share because it all trickles down, and streamers are making a lot of money, and it all needs to be shared. We're all in this, making a living here. So we're going to be a little bit on hold until that we couldn't shoot the film or anything until we cleared that, because we can't, right now you can't negotiate or talk with any of those companies that are involved. So we can't even approach that side of things. I was writing I was laid up in bed for a few days last year in November, and on Audible, I just stumbled upon a book called And Then She Vanished. It's part of a sci-fi time travel series of books by Nick Jones. He's another Brit. And I'd say 2 hours into this book, I was like, oh my God, I have to make this movie. It's all I could think about. As I was listening to this book, I was like, I have to tell this story. And I listened to probably 3 books in about 4 days. And then he has 5 books out now and 2 more coming. And I found him. I found the novelist on Instagram, and we are now collaborating. We've written basically almost the whole script is written. And so I really hope that we can, that's another one that we will pursue. And that's a big deal because it's a bit of a franchise. I see it because it's a great characters. We hope to shoot it in the UK, just a few hours north of London, and then I'm reading scripts all the time. I'd love to, of course, get into, scripted series, which is really hard to break into, but.
Well, if you ever do come over to the UK and actually film it and you need someone to make you a cup of tea, just give me a shout. I'll make a fantastic cup of tea according to the wine.
You got it. Absolutely.
But also, just quickly, as you mentioned about the books, and does it ever annoy you when directors make these films that are based on books and they get heavily criticised by people saying, well, the book's better or it's not like the book? Because for me, the way I look at it is that the director is taking their own version, their own vision of that story and putting it onto the screen. I mean, what's your view on that, on taking a book and turning it into a movie?
Yeah, it is challenging, and that is something, we're faced with in adapting this novel, also because the novel is like 500 pages,
Hmm.
and the film has to be, I mean, it's not going to be a short film, but I'm not at a level in my career where I can make a 3-hour movie, nor necessarily what I want to. But it's going to be a 120 or 125 page script. But so there has to be an economy of words. You have to kind of get to things a little bit quicker. Some of the character development and you know, the the exploration up from within the character, you have to, that has to be portrayed rather than told. And some novels can be very poetic, and you lose some of that. But hopefully, with visual storytelling, you can bring, you can tell a story, tell 1,000 words in a picture type of
Hmm.
thing. So yeah, and it's been very interesting, working with a novelist, because he's so close to it. And
Mm.
together, there's things we're cutting. I'm like, oh my God, that was one of my favorite parts of the book. But, that's 15 page. We just, you can't. You have to kill your darlings. And yeah, but it's, one of the things we're really wrestling with is that these characters really feel British. This really feels like a British story rather than American sensibilities. And we were kind of struggling with, do we make it a Brit relocated here? But, it starts, when the lead character's 13. So what did his parents, so right now we're saying we're shooting it and it takes place in the UK, in the Cotswolds or something, but so even if we end up having to shoot it in America for budgetary reasons, we probably will keep the characters British, and then I would go do some second unit. That's the dream. That's the
Excellent.
hope.
Well, we
Because
look
also,
forward to.
yeah.
Yeah, go. On. Yeah, go. Sorry, you're
No, I
going
was
to
just
say.
going to say that would also be a bone of contention with all the fans. How could
Yeah,
you take
yeah.
that and put it in, New York? So,
Well, they're doing it with Bridgerton and stuff like that. They're changing characters, which I think's awesome. It's very contemporary, and I love that sort of thing, which is going against the norm, what people expect. I think it's fantastic. But Sylvia, you've been a great guest. Thank you so much.
thank you.